We used to be pretty confident that we knew the relative strengths of human labor versus digital labor, or in other words, what the sustainable comparative advantage of human workers was going to be, even as computers got faster and better. And up until pretty recently, we thought that humans were going to hold out the high ground in a couple of very broad areas: pattern recognition and complex communication, or anything beyond just kind of rote messages back and forth with people. Now, what we've seen pretty recently, though, is that computers are actually extraordinarily good at some pattern recognition tasks. Watson, the Jeopardy-playing supercomputer, sits on top of hundreds of millions of documents. When it gets a question in real time, it scans those, kind of puts together its best answer, delivers that back in real time, and does it more accurately and more quickly than the best human Jeopardy players of all time. That is a really fantastic example of large-scale, very diverse pattern recognition. And when we look around, we see this happening over and over. E-discovery software is a category of software that replaces what human lawyers used to do during the discovery process in a lawsuit, for example, where basically what you do is request box loads of documents from the other side, hire people to sit around and read them and look for words and phrases and patterns. Well, all those documents are digital now, and looking for those patterns and words and phrases is something that software can do extraordinarily well. So by one estimate that we came across, e-discovery software lets one lawyer be as productive as 500 used to be in the old world. We see this happening with medical diagnosis, with radiology and pathology, and a lot of disciplines where you have very highly educated, highly trained, highly skilled knowledge workers. When I take a second look at what they're doing, I see them doing a lot of pattern recognition, and I think that those jobs are going to be confronted by some very powerful technology, some very powerful automation now and especially into the future. When we look at complex communication, it used to be the case that machine translations were a joke. They were just laughably bad. Now there are free, online, instantaneous, multi-language translation services available. They're not perfect, but they're not bad at all. We have technologies like Siri and a couple of competitors that will listen to what you're saying, and without needing a huge amount of training or a huge amount of background, we'll be able to figure out what you want and give it to you. So when Eric Brynjolfsson and I were researching our book, Race Against the Machine, we were driving around Northern California, and like always happens, you get lost somewhere looking for an on-ramp to a freeway. Eric had the bright idea. He pulled out his iPhone and said, "Siri, directions to 101 North," and the next thing we knew, we were heading down the highway in the right direction. So these technologies are going to be incredibly powerful and important for our lives and our economies, but they're eating into skills that we used to think were very uniquely human. A lot of the earnings announcements that we read in Forbes online today are generated or written not by a person, but by an algorithm. There's a company called Narrative Science that is writing up all of the corporate earnings announcements, turning them into stories. They read perfectly smoothly. We can do that for sporting events. We can do that to give feedback to a student or the manager of a franchise operation or anyone or in any situation where we start with a body of data and want to tell a story on top of that. Software exists that can do that now. So again, when we look at these super broad categories of pattern matching and complex communication, we used to think we humans held out the high ground. I still think we do hold out the absolute high ground, especially in really unstructured or nebulous situations, but the computers are eating away at that very, very quickly. And the one thing that I have learned in my recent work about technical progress is never say never when it comes to what digital technologies can and can't do. Now, that said, I have still never seen a creative computer. I've never seen a computer with anything that I would call taste or an aesthetic sense. I've never seen an entrepreneurial computer, and I've never seen a computer that knew which question to ask or what problem to go tackle next. And it reminds me of a phrase that I think Pablo Picasso said in 1973. He said, "Computers are useless. They can only give you answers." Now, that second half I think is probably right. That doesn't mean computers are useless, but it does mean that even as we move into this era of astonishingly powerful technologies, I think there's still a very strong role for human ingenuity, human talent, and human workers.